to the Construction Big Breakfast, where we give you a hearty serving of insider tips and business strategies to help fuel your day so you can thrive in the construction industry. Now, here's your host, Brendan Morahan.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Big Breakfast. I'm your host again today, Ben Pritchard, and my special guest today is Andrew, all the way from the other side of the pond, Washington, D.C. Welcome, Andrew. Thanks for getting up early for us.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben.
It's great. Do you want to sort of introduce yourself a little bit for our viewers and listeners?
Yeah, for sure. And again, thank you for having me. My name's Andrew Lindsey. I'm the Director of Applied Research and Development for a company called Alpha Corporation. We're an engineering, management, controls, and technology firm headquartered in the greater Washington, D.C. area. And we have a pretty heavy footprint nationwide with a loose presence internationally. So what I really work on with the firm is Web 3.0 or Industry 4.0 solutions and the integration, implementation, and adoption thereof across our services and projects.
Yeah, well, we'll get into all of that shortly, but the most important question of every podcast is, what did you have for breakfast, Andrew?
I had coffee and a croissant, and I wanted to do something a little bit more robust, but I just didn't have the time because of that barking little animal.
No, that's fine. I understand. Like we've discussed before, and just had a new puppy myself, so I know that they can be quite the distraction. So for those out in the world listening and watching this, we met a year or so ago, probably. Through sort of a mutual acquaintance over at UCL around the topic of blockchain. I don't know about you, but and what it's like over in the States, but here in the UK, blockchain is still very much sort of a great unknown, but also sort of greatly misunderstood. You say blockchain, 9 out of 10 people will go, "Oh, Bitcoin." I was like, no, not quite.
There.
Yeah. So I'm going to start this with a bit of a toughie question for you. If you had to do a bit of a sort of elevator pitch, 30 seconds to explain blockchain in as simple terms as you can, go.
Blockchain, from my perspective, is very much like the game of bingo, right? So when you're playing the game, you have a sheet that, has a very unique set of numbers on it. And oftentimes the person to your left and the person to your right has a sheet that is also participating in the game, but has a different set of unique numbers. Now, every time a number is called out, everybody marks on their own unique sheet that number has been called out. And ultimately, you have the ability to verify whether or not somebody was successful at reaching bingo. I think that's very much like distributed ledger technology, where everybody has their own ledger. It coordinates together to be able to verify a series of events that have taken place. But overall, you don't know what's to your left or to your right.
So the problem that we've had then is that we've been trying to get young people to go with blockchain. What we should be doing is the older people who play bingo every week.
Exactly.
We've got our demographics right. I've never heard it explained like that, and no, it's quite a nice little way of sort of explaining it. Certainly, you sort of introduce yourself as the Director of Applied Research and Development. I mean, that's quite a unique title in construction. There's not many construction companies out there who have an individual or a department dedicated to research and development. What was the sort of the course of action at Alpha? So I've forgotten the name of the of your Alpha Corporation. I was right. That made the sort of decide that this was important and deserved the investment and appoint you ultimately.
Yeah, so I think what really started to happen was I joined the firm really around strategy and business development. And so I started getting my hands dirty in that arena with a history in startups. So before Alpha, I ran a tech company called Source that's now in the process of acquisition. And before that, I ran a company called World Time Music, which did live media production. And then we actually ended up pivoting into technology for patron entry. And what was clear is that in a lot of these different markets, technology was a burgeoning opportunity to hit the ground running. But I never realized that in the construction market specifically, it really hadn't hit. And not only did, at least in the US market, not only did Web 3.0 solutions not start to get adopted on the ground, but Web 2.0 solutions, things like project management systems, are still pretty spot shot when it comes to the overall industry. And so, I think when we started to look at that from the value add opportunity, I ended up just sitting down and putting together roughly like a 50-page paper for the firm, proposing sort of what the opportunity was, what the costs could be, and whether we could develop this out sort of like a startup within the company. So that really led to building out Alpha Labs, which was our R&D department that operates very much like a startup. But the catalyst was, the project opportunities that ultimately came from just even entertaining the idea.
So like you say, the adoption of technology in construction is spotty, and you've got plenty of parts of the industry all around the world who, like you say, haven't really grasped Web 2.0 fully and the opportunity there. And you've jumped straight to 3.0. That the old adage of walk before you run, but you've gone straight to being Usain Bolt. Why do you think that leap and looking at sort of embracing blockchain within that solution can help maybe speed things up? Why did you sort of take that leap?
Yeah, I think there's really an opportunity to hopscotch almost the challenges, because I think a lot of the challenges that came from Web 2.0 specifically revolved around, who was paying for it, right? And I think that really the big challenge was that the value add was not there to the ultimate person or people paying for the project, right? So an example of this would be something like BIM, right? Where the challenge was that for a long period of time, there was no actual data to be able to understand how it was impacting the efficiency and efficacy of your project and your project teams. But further than that, what happened as a result is it was prohibitively expensive just to deploy on a project. And so the owners oftentimes were like, well, what am I going to do with it afterward? Right. And
I mean, I'll counter that slightly, and you can disagree maybe, but I think we are data rich but knowledge poor, and have been for a number of years. So we're very good at collecting data, but we don't often realize that we're even collecting it, never mind know what to do with it. And that's really been where the sort of the conversation breaks down between designers, constructors, and sort of clients and users. It's like, well, no one's telling anyone what they want to then properly be able to sort of collate the data and make best use of it throughout the project.
Yeah, I think, paired with that specifically is, then when you have access to that data, and fully agree, a lot of us have data even now that we're sitting on that we don't even know the value of, which can make a number of companies, even at the small end, competitive. But when it comes to, being able to make that actionable, the challenge is, I think when it comes to these projects, who owns what? Right? Who paid for that BIM model? Who, had the licensing fee for that project management system initially, right? Who then has access to that data? Who understands how to access that data? And so the challenge is then, I deal with this a number of times, or I have dealt with this a number of times, even over the last few months, which is just, we just have a bunch of documents. We think we may have developed a model in our last project a few years ago, but we don't know who has that model, right? And so you're just like, oh, here we go. So, oftentimes it's just a cost that's no longer, from our perspective, as useful, unless you can then coordinate it with things like these new advanced technologies that allow you to better understand that data, allow you to share that data more efficiently, make use of it, license it even.
And is that where you think that the sort of the ledgers, the distributed ledgers technology can really sort of help make strides, because there is that sort of requirement almost to share and verify data, and sort of a model of shared ownership if required that's inherently built into how you then apply it?
Absolutely. When it comes to the data behind buildings, behind infrastructure, there's a really clear opportunity, and I actually presented on this for the Construction Blockchain Consortium in Paris, focusing specifically around insurance and claims. And the idea around it was, let's take this asset information and not create a highly complex BIM model, which, not to take away from that, I fully appreciate what the value is, but, let's just get this information digitized and trackable, such that then we can do things like make sure the contractors have the appropriate vendor and or materials and supplies information. Make sure that the vendors know where, what was the last most updated thing that was done to the part, such that they're not trying to get on-site coordinating, the most recent updates that way. And that can go all the way to the facility manager, the building underwriter, the financier, starting to much more understand the risks and liabilities associated with carrying these buildings, but also the benefits and the opportunities to make it so much more effective.
So if I was to play devil's advocate, I would argue that a lot of that can already be done with the tools that we already have in that sort of Web 2.0 level. What is it that you think unlocks it at that sort of Web 3.0 with blockchain and a DLT and everything? Is it just that it's easier for people? Will it be a cultural mind shift change because of the use of the technology, or is it just that it almost forces you to do it because the rules require you to do it?
So I think one of the big areas that, we still use Web 2.0 solutions, and the problem is still highlighted, is transactional costs. And, staying away from the idea of, blockchain as a cryptocurrency, but just focusing on using it as sort of a removal of transactional barriers. Just verifying information between parties takes a significant amount of time. I was actually just on a panel where one of the leaders from the innovation for construction at McKinsey said it was caught up somewhere in 30 to 40% of overall construction costs is caught up in verification and yeah, those types of sort of fractured transactional costs. And so, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, another sort of, for me as well, this sort of the verification. Before I joined Invennt, I used to work in nuclear decommissioning, and I mean, we used to call it like the nuclear factor, the safety factor, and there was always sort of, well, is it really required? And the problem you've got in a lot of industries where there's lots of regulation is, you've got a stack, yay high of rules that no one will ever know. So you always go and put that little bit extra into it. But if you could create some sort of process out of that has that sort of verification built in, that takes the person out of it, the emotion out of it, you would save time because it could be done fairly quickly. You just feed it into the machine and you get the answer, yes, it ticks the box, or no. And you ultimately would probably get something better value because it hasn't got, all the swings and roundabouts that aren't required in the final answer. So I think you're right. The verification element of it, I think, has got some real fantastic potential applications.
Yeah, no, I think that's, and when it comes to just that aspect alone, getting the industry on board without having something that reflects the digital etch in stone would be, I think, a huge challenge. But this thing has been tried and true as far as the security aspect, more than once, and also in a number of major upstream industries like oil and gas and the like. And the thing about that, though, that I think becomes really important is also then the ability to have, some form of shared basis for information, that's an expectation, and some form of privacy around certain information, right? So one of the things that has come up in a number of conversations around blockchain is this permissioned ledger. And I don't want to get too sort of crazy into the technical side of it, but having a portion of that information be publicly accessible to all, and having a portion of that information very, very secure to the owner and whoever has access to it during a period of time. And I think that makes sense just because right now, even when there are expectations to release data, you're going down a wormhole to go find out who has the data, if it's the right data, was it ever adjusted and updated?
Yeah, whereas with if you've got your ledger, it tells you exactly when anyone ever did it because you can't go back and change it.
Right.
It makes loads of sense. So I mean, we've both sort of spoken about some of the why you would, but like all things with construction, there's not a lot of people who are. So what are the blockers you see when you try and talk to people in the industry that is stopping sort of this really sort of taking flight?
Absolutely. So, I think I approach this topic cautiously because, I think it's done with the best intent. And I think also the industry operates with very thin margins. But one of the biggest areas that I think the industry as a whole makes use of is waste, right? And so the challenge is that oftentimes the more waste you have, or the more sort of surplus unaccounted for waste you have, the better off you are, because that's not your problem. And the challenge is that, there isn't sort of something on the ground that is actually actionable data that is doing away with a significant amount of waste. I think the other big part that's playing into it that sort of ties into that is that as an industry, we have counterproductive incentives. Right. So, if you're operating with a design, bid, build type contract structure, where you're separating that front end and back end process, the biggest area that you're running into is putting it out to bid and probably underpricing yourself to get that project. Now you're being told that you need to put in something that's going to even cut down further on those margins that you actually now have to learn how to use in the first place. So, there's going to be a large degree of pushback when it comes to that in an industry that operates again with such thin margins, and again operating at a hourly basis.
Yeah, we really need to change the model of the industry to better understand where value is created. Construction is a fantastic pillar of any economy. It creates social benefit as well as economic benefit, but people sort of see it as a sort of almost a byproduct. It's something that is useful and it's not really seen as that real enabler for positive change in a country. With things like you mentioned it already, the Construction Blockchain Consortium, the CBC, you get to see sort of all over the world sort of how different countries are sort of approaching the problem, approaching solutions. Are you seeing sort of a unified approach? Are some parts of the world sort of turning their back on it, and some going, no, this is the solution to cure all evils?
No, so that's the thing is actually, I think this conversation is very relevant right now because, on the US side specifically, well, let me take a step back. I think things in the UK surrounding blockchain are reaching that hype curve back end, right? Where a lot of groups are like, okay, this has been really hyped up. We've put a lot of money into this technology. We want to see some serious results and data before we go any further with it. And we haven't gotten there, from my perspective, we haven't gotten there in the US yet. I think the UK is a little bit more innovative and a little bit more sort of forward thinking when it comes to those types of infrastructure projects. However, right now, I'm, experiencing 3 independent conversations that are all looking for this sort of unified perspective with a lot of major stakeholders, right? I think one group to look at is a company called Prairie Dog down in Texas. Yeah. So, we've been chatting with Pete Dumont, as well as the Construction Progress Coalition. And it's been a really interesting discussion, because I think the broader focus is, we have to actually establish things like standards and best practices around this thing before we even remotely entertain putting it into, a project and pretending like it's going to be, effective.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not a fan of the name, but yeah. I've seen Pete present a couple of times over here, actually, and it's amazing the impact he has on an audience. Sort of, you'd probably say half to 3/4 of the audience think they've seen the future, and then the rest are just thoroughly confused and are very lost. But no, he's, I mean, he talks a lot, doesn't he, about that, the cost of doing everything in the industry and how we can get rid of that, and the sort of the pyramid sort of shape of our industry, really sort of breaking things. So how can we break down that transactions? And some of the research he's done around those transactional costs, they're I mean, they're interesting. I mean, it's just ridiculous how much we lose just through those transactions, according to his research. But it'll be because he was, with everything that's happened, obviously I haven't heard much about where he's got to in the last sort of 6 months to a year, but hopefully we'll start seeing some good progress coming from that. And you've got your own platform as well that you're currently developing. Do you want to sort of talk a little bit about that, what you hope that will achieve and the likes?
Absolutely, yeah. So the platform that I'm developing is called the Cooperative Open Science Network, or Cosign for short. What we're focused on building is a toolkit for research and development projects, largely focused across 4 discrete areas. One is actually getting the tax, incentivizing the project. We're doing that by facilitating a much more efficient process around the R&D tax credit that we have, that you guys have, that's actually all around the world. But most groups don't make use of, also here and also over there. The second part is then the analyze part. So giving you a better idea of what's happening on your project, both from an effective, project standpoint, but also then from a cost breakdown standpoint. The third is then the collaborate. So if you have any sort of knowledge or expertise gaps within your project, being able to identify those early on and identify then the people you can collaborate with to fill those gaps. And then finally, the invest. And the big focus on this, and I think this is the big area that we're going after, is it's an alternative investment marketplace. So currently, if you want to be, say, or want to roll out a corporate venture capital fund, you have to be an accredited investment firm, which then really heavily limits the amount of firms that are actually able to collaborate at scale with startups. But what we're doing is actually creating sort of an in-kind or sweat equity marketplace that allows for these companies to establish a vesting equity schedule, such that it's no longer an accredited investment, but it's a collaboration. Oh. So that's really what we're doing now, and we're actually heavily in the development cycle. I'm working with a lot of great tax experts from some big firms to guide us along.
Yeah, well, I mean, that first one, the tax credits, is actually something that we help a lot of our clients with here in the UK and in Canada as well. And you're right, it's amazing how people just don't realize how hard construction is and really take for granted some of the really innovative solutions that they do. But then to sort of counter that with then, especially in Canada, where you're being able to record, show your records is very important, and that's often where some of the claims can't be maximized as much as they could do, just by having sort of a well-documented process of, we hit some trouble, we came up with a hypothesis, and we sort of did it. You try and explain that, and it's just like, well, that's every construction project. I know.
But that's the thing, right? And that's where the blockchain comes up, actually, is, being able to actually identify that during the project carries a lot more weight than trying to look back over the last, well, in the case of the US, 3 years, and say, you know what? Yeah, that seems like, that met the threshold for a scope of work document, right? Like,
Yeah.
just having these actually recorded as you're exchanging them between stakeholders securely means that you'll be able to transfer that documentation over to your accountant or just manage it yourself, such that if you're audited, you have it. It's all built into the project.
Oh, that's interesting. We'll have to talk more about that after. So we're coming sort of towards the end of our half an hour. It's amazing how quick it goes, isn't it? We could talk for another few hours quite easily. But if those out there who are listening, watching, would like to hear more and learn more about sort of blockchain in construction, how to get involved, where to sort of find the tools that are already out there or in development, would you say that the CBC, the Blockchain Consortium, is the best place to go? How do they get more involved in that if they want?
Absolutely. So we have a variety of different things going on. One, if you're interested in joining at, say, an individual or a corporate level, there is the membership where you'll get, access to all the sort of information that we've developed so far, as well as a white paper that is, close to being released. In addition to that, for, a smaller fee, something that's a little bit more month to month, we have a newsletter that you can do really no payment for, and you could also do as high as you want. And the idea of it is that we're just trying to get you the information, and we really appreciate any help that we can get. And then the last part is we're likely going to be rolling out a number of pilot projects relatively soon. Where the member base will be voting on those projects in partnership with the CBC partners. So it's really exciting to see what happens with that, but I think that'll also bring forth some more news in the space on your side of the pond.
Oh, cool. Well, we'll put the a link to the CBC website, and we'll have you in the bio on YouTube. Make sure that people can just sort of scroll down there and follow the links if they need. But Andrew, it's been great to catch up. I think we've got a few things to carry the conversation on with over the next few weeks. Definitely. It's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day. And for those out there listening and watching, please remember to like, share and subscribe to make sure that you don't miss on any future Construction Big Breakfasts.
This was great. Thank you so much for having me, Ben. I'm really looking forward to talking soon.